I've got my hecklers in here. That's good. Oh, I'm so grateful to be here. I love visiting with people that are trying to do great things in their life and trying to have an impact. A little bit of background to add to what was presented. I've worked with companies, hundreds of companies all over the world, thousands of individuals. I do executive mentorship and coaching at a founder and executive level. I've also sat as an executive inside companies for almost 15 years of my career. So I've kind of got both sides of the table. And what I've noticed on this topic of the hidden ceiling of leadership, it's something that I've witnessed that I've actually been subject to as well. And so the different types of companies that I've worked with in many different industries, from small startups to companies that have gone from $3 million in annual revenue to almost $2 billion in annual revenue in 3 years. And part of the executive teams that help lead those growth and scale factors. And so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as leaders, sometimes we're trying to be the solution, we're trying to do good things, we're trying to have an impact, and we miss things. And so the essence of this presentation is how leaders and founders and executives get in the way of their own growth. So how many of you in this room are founders? By raise of hands. Awesome. Thank you for being in here. I hope that some of this will deeply resonate with you. If you've got your phones, there are going to be some questions that'll be on some of these slides. I would have you take a photo of those questions or write them down, because they're questions that are meant for you to go and reflect on and really apply, as we heard early from the MC today. Today is about taking what we learn and putting it into play and not just leaving it here. So let's dive in. Companies, they don't stall because leaders stop caring. They stall because they get in the way. And there's this ceiling of growth that happens, and I'll walk through what these different ceilings are. How many of you that are founders have also worked for a leader of a company that's ever stalled out? Okay. So some of this might be recognizable. If you look at the tabs on the right, micromanagement, inability to delegate authority, fear of losing control, identity attached to being the person who knows. At a founder level, at an executive level, leader level, management level, these things, I find them coming into play all the time. And the sad reality is, as leaders, we become habituated to our way of being, and we don't notice when this is happening. And I'll give you a quick example of habituation. How many of you know what habituation means? Okay, no raise of hands. One. What's that? Automatic? That's a great definition. Habituation is just becoming so accustomed to our surroundings that we forget where we are. And one of the things that can happen as leaders, Jim Rohn said, you're the byproduct of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And what does that mean? We adopt the attitudes, the ambitions, the justifications, the language, all these things with people that we spend a lot of time with. Well, if we're at work and we're with our teams and we're trying to solve problems and we're upset and we're agitated, well, it doesn't just stay at work, it flows home with us. So I'll give a very personal example of this. About 10 years ago, I was laying in bed one night next to my sweetheart, and she rolled over. She said, "Art, you're not the man I married. You've hardened. Our kids are afraid of you, and I feel like I'm no longer your number one." I remember laying there wanting to argue this, justify, make sense of it, because it wasn't true in my head at all. In fact, it was completely opposite, but I didn't. I had this nudge, just don't argue it, just say thank you. So I said thank you, and all night I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, like, how could this be? I love my children. I'm not an abusive father. I don't yell at them. I don't beat them. I love my spouse more than anything. In fact, every day, all day, I think about her. And this was a time in my life where I felt I was doing everything I could to be a provider, to be a good provider. I was doing what I could to become a better human being, I felt. And I felt like I was trying to be the best dad that I could and the best spouse that I could be. Well, obviously, the people that I loved and cared about the most were not experiencing me in that way. And so when I thought about it, Jim Rohn's quote came to my head the next morning, and immediately I knew. I had become so habituated and influenced by the team that I was spending all my time with and the problems that we were solving that I was attached to my phone. My kids weren't afraid of me because I was mean. They were afraid of me because I was never accessible to them. I always had something else to do besides them. My wife was experiencing the same thing. All the founders that I was working for at the time, I was serving as a chief strategy officer for a company. And my belief was if I didn't ever take the phone call, that I was going to lose my job and I was no longer going to be a great provider, or I was going to drop the ball on something. So 6 o'clock in the morning to midnight every day, 7 days a week, that phone was always available. If I was at dinner with my wife and that phone rang and it was Mark, I picked it up. There was always a justification as to why I needed to do that. And maybe it was just a few seconds or it was just going to take a couple minutes. But that's how quickly we can become habituated and unaware of our actions and how we're showing up. So that sad reality that most leaders will never realize that they're the ceiling in their business, it's real. So here are the 3 hidden ceilings. These are the things I'm going to go through. Ego is one of those. Identity and avoidance. Identity was mentioned this morning. We're going to get more into identity and how that plays out as a leader. So let's talk about the first one. Founders, well, let's go back. The subtext on this. The identity is the belief that who I built the company with, that person that I was to build and to find this level of expertise, to have a product that was marketable in the marketplace, developing a team. You kind of have this identity that I'm not just the founder and owner, but I'm also the chief cook and bottle washer. All of the things, that owner-operator mindset. And that's what was necessary to get to maybe where you are today. So that version of you that built the company is this identity that we continue to carry, and we think that that identity is necessary. So founders that realize they have to become a CEO, that's an identity shift, right? Operators who feel like they have to become a strategist, that's an identity shift. It's a new skill set. And then doers that must become leaders of leaders. This is one of my favorite. There is a pivot that oftentimes happens not by choice, but by necessity. If you have a star performer on your team, usually what happens is you want to try to replicate their efforts. And so what do? Let's go have you lead a team. You're a great producer. Let's go have you lead a team and have you help do the same thing. Get more people to be just like you. Well, that pivot from a producer to a leader is a pretty big chasm. And what happens is when we get frustrated, performers get turned off by non-performers. When a performer gets to that stage, it's easier just to go do it themselves. And it's easier to go back to being a great producer. And so there's a different skill set and a different aptitude that leadership requires. So that's one ceiling. The identity, again, that created success can also prevent the next level of success. So here's a question. Again, take a snapshot of it or write it down. We won't spend time on this right now. I wish this was a facilitated session and we could spend time just like our previous speaker here. But here's a question. Where might your current identity be limiting your next level of leadership? Did I get in your way? Okay. So we're going to talk about questions in a minute, but briefly, questions have the power to unlock new beginnings and new realizations. And so great leaders ask really good questions of themselves and their team. This is a great question. Where is my current identity limiting the next level of leadership that might be required of me? Okay, here's one of the other ceilings, the ego ceiling. This isn't maybe ego in the sense that we normally associate around arrogance, but this is something a little bit more subtle. Again, think about leaders that you've either worked with, are working with, or even yourself if you're in an executive role or founder role. This need to be the smartest person in the room Again, we're not actively expressing that, saying, hey, I am the smartest person in the room. But there is a desire, or at least a belief, that I have to have all the answers. Gallup did a poll a number of years ago. They asked founders and executives 2 questions. One was, what do you fear the most? And the question was being caught as a fraud, not knowing what I'm doing, just winging it. Well, most business owners and most leaders are just winging it. They're taking all the information they have today, past information, given ecosystem, and we're just making the best decision that we can in that moment. So the second thing that Gallup found is the founders and executives and leaders indicated that they felt like they didn't have a place where they could go say the words, I don't know. So they didn't. They didn't ask a question of their team. They didn't want to be seen by their team as not having all the right answers. And that needing to be the smartest person in the room is driven by ego. That need to approve everything. I own this company. I'm the one that is tied to this financially. I'm the one that's signing on the banknote. I'm the one that's built this to this point, and the customers count on us to be precise and exact. So I need to make sure that I'm approving every single thing that goes out the door in front of a customer. Again, that's tied to ego, that desire or that need, that, and maybe some of you don't feel this way, but of all the leaders I've worked with, this is something that still hangs on. That last one, needing to remain central. Again, I just want to be in the loop. Maybe I don't need to approve everything, but I want to know everything that's happening. Well, as your organization grows and scales, it's almost impossible to be in every conversation, every email, every phone call, every sales encounter, every customer service solution. It just gets harder and harder. So you have to rely on your team. But if I remain central to the business, the other thing is, if the business relies on me, how many companies do you see that are attached to a name? Fixology is not attached to a name, right? It's a brand. And it's building a brand that can be recognized in the marketplace, and not recognized because of the founder, but recognized because of what the brand does. And so if you remain central to your business will rise and fall on you. Okay, ego in leadership. It's not necessarily arrogance, but rather the belief that everything still needs to be run through you. What does it cost? Stephen Covey, in The Speed of Trust, he said, when trust is high, speed goes up, costs go down. When trust is low, speed goes down, costs go up. I could say amen to that all day long. And ego slows things down. Control slows things down. Having to be the funnel that everything flows through slows down. And what does it come across to your team? You hired a team member to be part of the solution, to be part of the team, to solve for something, take something onto their plate that you couldn't handle anymore. And your attachment to it, or desire to control or to be in the mix so much, often comes across as, I'm not trusted. So when you give somebody responsibility and then you take it away by having to micromanage or be in the mix of everything, it diminishes that. And what happens is that team member starts to become complacent, and they're like, well, if I bring my own ideas to the table, it's always going to get thrown out because the owner has a certain way that they want things to go, and the innovation starts to slow. So I hope you're starting to get a feel for this ceiling and how it happens. So slow organizations, disempowered teams, and decision bottlenecks. Trying to grow and build a business, those are the things you don't want, but you're probably getting if you feel like you're plateaued or stuck. The avoidance ceiling, this will be our last one. And time-wise, how are we doing? We're doing good. Okay. I want to make sure we're not missing some of this stuff. All right, the avoidance ceiling. When we avoid the difficult things, it's usually rooted in fear and in insecurity, and oftentimes deceit, trying to mask or cloud or hide something that possibly is a deficiency of ours or something that we're afraid to address. So here are some instances where that might come into play. We might avoid difficult conversations. How many of you have a difficult conversation that you know you need to have, but you've been avoiding it? Hesitancy to address underperformance. What about that? I see a lot of heads nodding. If we've got a structure problem, how often do we table it? Or we really should be sitting down and solving for this, but we've allowed the tyranny of the urgent to outweigh the priority of the important. And that last one, we start to ignore cultural drift. What is cultural drift? I had a good friend of mine and mentor. He would say that you can have culture by design or you can have culture by default. Culture by default is cultural drift. It's just subject to the winds of the day. Whatever we're reactive to, whatever problem comes up, where we're going to focus our energy as a leader. I think it's Maxwell that talks about his 25-50-25 rule, where he states that people in the organization are always watching what the leaders do, where they spend their time and energy. Well, we've got a bottom 25 that are counterculture, cats away, mice will play. They're usually disruptive, a lot of drama. They're not making you any money. They're usually costing you money. They're causing customer problems. And so as a leader, if we're spending all of our time trying to fix that, we have our performers on the other end of the spectrum, the top 25, that are cultural enhancers. They're the ones that are building the business. They could run it better than you if you were gone. And we're ignoring them by focusing on that bottom 25. And so that middle 50 that Maxwell talks about is always looking to see where you go spend your time and resources. If you want to know what somebody prioritizes in their life, look at their calendar and look at their checkbook. It will be very telling of what somebody prioritizes. You look at an organization, you look at what they're spending their money on. If they say marketing is important and they're spending very little on marketing, then it's not important. If somebody says that my relationship with my spouse is really important and I want to make that better, you can't see anything on their calendar of Wednesday night, date night, it's probably not important. Or it hasn't raised, the level of necessity in their life hasn't raised enough to make that a priority. So ignoring cultural drift, things just start to fizzle a little bit. It's not as fun as it used to be. We had so much collaboration and excitement and enthusiasm for the work when we started, and now it seems like we're just showing up and checking the boxes, and it's not as fun anymore. There's probably been some drift, and it's probably been because we've avoided certain responsibilities as a leader. Accountability is an interesting thing. Most people want to be held accountable. But when we talk about accountability, it's like having the hairs on the back of your neck go up, like you're talking about budget. And accountability can be something that really helps us celebrate what we're doing well and helps us source the challenges that we have. Okay? Leaders rarely lose organizations because of what they don't know. They lose them because they already know what they need to be doing, but they're avoiding it. This is the one I see the most. This is where leaders get stuck. Because they're afraid that if I disrupt things too much, this is a new skill set that now I'm moving from a producer into a leader role, and I have to take some responsibility for the trajectory of our company, and maybe where we're missing mark or where we have opportunities. And I have a team that maybe isn't as responsive. I'll share this with you. I don't have it on my slide, but I really believe this, and I've got a client right now that I'm working through this deep within the organization. The day you realize nobody wants to follow you is the day that your leadership journey starts. And as a leader, you'll all experience that. There will be a time where you feel you're just not helping your team connect the dots, that you're not able to affect change like you had hoped, and possibly even you have a team that's just rejecting your leadership altogether. That's the day that your leadership journey starts. And that's a fun place to be, and it's really scary, and you don't know how to move and impact that. And usually what it means is you've got to get back to work as a leader because you've stopped being a leader. All right, so let's talk about the evolution. Great leaders learn to ask better questions. I mentioned that a moment ago. So here's 4 questions. What got me here that I must let go of? Where am I the bottleneck? What hard truth am I avoiding? And who must I become next? So I would hope that you'll see from those questions, none of them are a yes-no answer. That one on what hard truth am I avoiding is probably the closest to that. But each of these should warrant time and resource. What do I mean by that? You'll probably have a first pass answer on all of these. And it's what you want to hear yourself say. It's what you want others to hear you say. I would challenge you to go back and answer it again. Think about it. Be honest. This is a mirror moment for you as a leader. Everybody get those questions? Take a snapshot of them. Okay, so I'm going to introduce one of the things that you can do to unlock your leadership. And that is leadership where growth is not expected of the company, but it's expected of its leader, is where you'll start to unlock your leadership. Oftentimes, the leader looks at the organization as the problem. They look at their team as the problem. Well, you're the owner. And we know that culture is representative of the values and habits of its leaders. So, with that, if we don't expect growth of our leaders will be stagnant. So what does it take? You got to be different than most leaders. You got to be willing to evolve. You got to let go of the version of yourself that once worked. You got to openly confront the hard truths about where you might be the bottleneck. That was in that last slide. Stop believing you have to be the answer. And have the courage to become somebody new. Here's the hard truth. The version of you that built what you have today may not be the version required to take it where it needs to be tomorrow. And that's okay to realize that. In fact, that's probably the breakthrough that you need. If you're a founder in here and you're wondering why we're stalling, why we're slowing down a bit, why we're not able to scale the way that we want to, it lies right here. It's in the opportunity that sits in front of you. So I'm going to give you these two questions in closing. Again, question one, these are the ones that I think matter most right now. Who is your leadership asking you to become next? I want you to think about your own leadership and the team that's begging for you to lead better. Because they're also not telling you need to be a better leader, but they're talking about it. And I see you shaking your head because you see it all the time, right? Okay, question number 2, are you willing to do the work to become that person? And I love this question. It's just, am I willing? Am I willing to do what it takes? It's a choice, and it's one that will significantly shift your leadership. Thank you.